Thank you for joining me on my channel Catfish Part 3 video, Nutrition and Feeding. And while my intro is playing, please take the time to subscribe to my channel. And when you're finished, like this video. Thank you very much. In part 1, I showed the full map of the United States from this animal feed consumption report published earlier in 2025 by the American Feed Industry Association. What I've done here now is I have zoomed in on the American Southeast. Uh, we see here the top feed producers in 2023. So the top three, Mississippi, Alabama, and Arkansas, and Texas, they are all well-known producers of channel catfish. Mississippi, of course, being by far the largest. And then there are small amounts grown in Louisiana here, but the quantities are not very large. It's not even in the top 10. In terms of California, California has lots of different species. They've got tilapia, they do have catfish, they've got white sturgeon and other species. So that's primarily that. And Idaho, up here in the northwest of the United States, is the main producer of aquifer raised farmed trout. But looking specifically now in the catfish area, we see Mississippi, Arkansas, Alabama, and Texas. These are the main ones. I showed you a different version of this area in part 1, showing you the delta. So this is the area that is known as the delta. And according to this map, which comes out of the book Biology and Culture of Channel Catfish by Tucker and Hargreaves, the dark gray area is the primary area where the catfish are farmed here along the Mississippi River, spanning Mississippi, Arkansas, and also a little bit of Louisiana. And then there is another belt over here stretching from Mississippi into Alabama, called the Blackland Prairie. And there are some spots here where there are lots and lots of farms. I asked Perplexity AI, one of my favorite AIs for finding out scientific information, about the total estimated catfish production in the southeastern U.S. in 2023. And it said 146 million metric tons. The top catfish producers in 2020, 23, 2024 were Mississippi, approximately 83 million metric tons, 57% of the total Southeast U.S. production. Alabama, 43.6 million metric tons, approximately 29%. And then Arkansas, 7.26 million metric tons, about 5%. I found this very interesting paper, Channel Catfish, Ictalurus punctatus, Nutrition in the United States, a Historical Perspective. Now, in part 1, I was using a historical perspective on channel catfish farming in the United States. This document instead is focusing on channel catfish nutrition, giving us a historical background and breakdown up to the present day about channel catfish nutrition at the QR code right there. What I have to present has either been ideas that have been taken directly from this paper or else has given me the idea to look elsewhere for information. So, for example, this information coming from this paper, here we are. Prior to the start of channel catfish nutrition research in the late 1950s and early 1960s, catfish farming relied on pond fertilization to boost natural pond productivity, as well as attempts to use available ingredients to produce mixed feeds. And some examples that they give: cooked cornmeal and freshwater mussels, minced goldfish and liver, presumably beef liver. And the first published feed formula was released in 1947 for catfish, and it consisted of 50% crayfish abdomens, or if crayfish abdomens weren't available, beef, spleen, and liver, 16.7% fish meal, 16.7% cottonseed meal, and 16.7% dried skimmed milk. I found this paper by Lewis from 1973, and quoting from this abstract right there: two experimental fish diets, one consisting of 50% roasted soybeans and 50% fresh fish, and another consisting of 30% soybeans, 20% cornmeal, and 50% fresh fish, both with vitamin and mineral supplements, were compared to Oregon pellets in a 6-week feeding trial using yearling channel catfish. Oregon pellets, or as they were more commonly known, Oregon moist pellets, were pellets that were made in the Pacific Northwest for feeding salmon. They were primarily made from fresh fish, fish meal, some cereals, grains, vitamins, and so on. And they were produced using pasta extruders, very large pasta extruders with dies, big, like 10, 15 inches across. And these pellets would fall out of the extruder, and they would drop directly into the mouth of a blast freezer. So these pellets were instantaneously frozen after being cut into short pellets from the face of the extruder. The pellets were then packed frozen, stored frozen, transported to the farm frozen, and kept frozen until use. I worked in a salmon hatchery in British Columbia, and at the beginning we were using Oregon moist pellets because at that time there was nothing else. So by comparing these feeds with an Oregon moist pellets, it was kind of like comparing to the the best known and best performing feed that was maybe available in the US at that time. Now, in the late 1950s and early 1960s, the late Professor Dr. John E. Halver, there's a photograph of him taken later on in his life, he began to develop scientific methods to study rainbow trout and salmon nutrition. He first investigated vitamin and amino acid requirements of rainbow trout, and he published this book, Fish Nutrition. He was the editor and contributor. The first edition came out in 1972. Not surprisingly, his work generated widespread interest in using these methods with other species, including channel catfish, and his work generated a great deal of interest in the American Southeast to use this for developing catfish feed. And that's why the these methods came out, that was really the beginning of the trend to investigate catfish nutrition, as mentioned previously. And then further to drive interest, in 1973, the U.S. National Research Council published the first fish nutrition guide, nutrition requirements of trout, salmon, and catfish. So this was back in 1973. It was only 57 pages. We see in the upper right-hand side the list of the Animal Nutrition Committee of the National Academy of Sciences, and then the Subcommittee on Fish Nutrition. And in this list, we have Charles Deyo and Harry Dupree, who were among the first to begin researching catfish nutrition in United States. Then Dr. Halver released a second edition of Fish Nutrition in 1989. This is a scan of the front page of my personal edition, which was signed by Dr. Halver. In fact, for this edition, I researched and updated all of the ingredient and data tables that were found in the appendixes. When we now look at this list of contributors, we see a much larger list, many coming from the university, Stirling University in Scotland. So Scotland, many here, 5 or 6, 7, 8 from Scotland. We have John Halver and Ron Hardy from Seattle. We have George Pygott from Seattle, and also Barbie Tucker from Seattle. So these were all people in the sphere of Dr. Halver. And from the south, we have Richard Lovell, who was at Auburn University, and he contributed a chapter called Diet and Fish Husbandry. And then we also had Robert Wilson from Mississippi State University, wrote the chapter on amino acids and proteins, which was kind of his specialty. The real benefit of the work of Dr. Halver was the development of a vitamin test diet for long-term feeding studies, the first purified test diet. Dr. Halver's first successful one was Diet H440. And so this diet published in 1957. So this was really the beginning of fish nutrition as an area of study, allowing for the first time a diet that animals would in fact eat, that would allow us then to begin to test requirements. And this was used first of all for vitamins in this case, and then later on it was modified by also Dr. Halver and researchers like Robert Wilson to study amino acid requirements. Among the main ingredients, vitamin-free casein, purified gelatin, 2 very highly digestible sources of protein, corn oil, purified cod liver oil, and then a couple of carbohydrates, white dextran, and alpha cellulose flour. It also contained a small mineral mixture, and then these vitamins in these proportions. Now, in order to test a vitamin deficiency, qualitatively, is it needed or not needed, simply would be to delete one of these out and grow the fish for some period of time. It might be days, it might be weeks. In a few cases, it might even take a few months in order to see deficiency signs develop. Now, to prove that this diet was in fact a valid diet, here's a graphic Dr. Halver prepared in that paper comparing the growth on fresh minced beef liver and his diet. And he showed that he could basically get essentially the same growth profile, indicating that the fish not only ate it, but in fact they grew. Dr. Dupree used Halver's H440 diet with minor modifications, and he published the first paper reporting qualitative requirements for water-soluble vitamins. And Here's the report of the Bureau of Sport Fisheries and Wildlife, vitamins essential for growth of channel catfish. This is a large barcode because the original document was digitized by Google. So if you search for vitamins essential for growth of channel catfish and maybe you use Dr. Dupree's name, you will actually get Google Books turning up, and in the upper left-hand corner there will be a little box to click to read ebook or e-document, and when you click on that, down at the bottom you can find a place where you can click and actually download this. So there are several other books that I found this way. Focusing in on Dr. Dupree's work, this was an example of a required vitamin, pantothenic acid, nicotinic acid, and you see here B6 pyridoxine. So when you had a uh, time frame here, weeks in this axis, and then you had average weight in grams, and you fed a diet with and without. When you included the pyridoxine, you got a consistent growth, although we did at this time we didn't know how much, but we were able to show that it was needed because in the diet that didn't have it, the fish grew until they ran out of their stored body stock supplies, and from that point on, they would stop growing, and because they were deficient in this very important vitamin, which is involved in amino acid metabolism, they would start to lose weight. And then in the same diet, without the pyridoxine, from this point on, you would also begin to see mortalities happening. Now, at this point here on this graph, and this is the same point on this graph, they injected pyridoxine into the bodies of the fish. And then as soon as the pyridoxine was now available again, growth started, although very, very delayed. And the fish, many of them were not in very good shape. Mortality essentially stopped increasing from that point on. It stayed about the same. Whereas when we're dealing with a vitamin that is not required, in this case looking at inositol, when the vitamin was there or not there, growth carried on just the same. There was no difference, and there was also essentially no mortality. Now, curiously, Dr. Dupree put biotin in this list, but he did make a warning. He said, I think this is a mistake. For biotin is really needed for all animals that we know of. And I don't know why I didn't see it. Now, I would just say offhand that it was because the biotin, first of all, is used in very minor quantities, and also based on the diet that he may have been feeding prior to this, there may have been enough body stores that the experiment needed to go on for more than 30 weeks. Because you see here, he's talking about, well, in this case, 24 weeks here and 30 weeks here. So he may have actually needed to go on for a couple of months in order to actually see that. And he simply did not carry the experiment on long enough to drain out the storage supply in the body. So he didn't see one, but he said, I'm concerned that it's needed, but I didn't find out. Curiously, Dr. Dupree found ascorbic acid, and I believe the same problem occurred as with the biotin. That is that the experiment simply did not go on long enough. The fish would have been given some kind of a pre-trial diet, presumably which may have had ascorbic acid in it, and he simply did not carry out the experiment long enough. Dr. Halver found that with rainbow trout, skin was a very durable storage location for ascorbate 2 sulfate. And as the fish tissue became deficient, that the animal would take that ascorbate 2 sulfate out of the skin and turn it into ascorbic acid for use in metabolism. And then he also tested para-aminobenzoic acid, which at that time was considered a possible vitamin. Early research in catfish nutrition was conducted at universities and government facilities and institutions all across the American Southeast. In Alabama, at Auburn University, in Arkansas, at the USDA Fish Farming Experimental Station, in Georgia, in Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, at Mississippi State University, Texas, Texas A&M, and Kansas State College, which is now Kansas State University. And on the right-hand side here, from Dr. Wilson's 1981 book, here is an example of a purified diet for channel catfish, which is somewhat simpler than Dr. Halver's H440. And here we have the vitamins that were added at what concentration, and also the form and quantity of each of the minerals that was found in this purified diet. So after those early advances in understanding that vitamins were in fact required and beginning then to start research into vitamin requirements, we saw then the first farmer-owned feed mill opened in 1974 in Mississippi. In the combination of cooperative feed mills owned by farmers and public-funded research led to the practice of publishing open feed formulas. These were not proprietary, and many of these researchers, such as Dr. Lovell, worked closely with the open feed mills, the cooperative feed mills, to update their research findings and update their feed formulas regularly. So they were always using the most updated formulas that were available. Going back to before the first real warm water formula that is based on beginning of research, we have this much earlier reported open warm water fish feed formula from Auburn University dating back to 1957. So it had 42% crude protein. You see the main ingredients there: soy, peanut meal, fish meal, and distillers dried solubles. That formula was modified slightly. Peanut meal was removed because it would include the casings for the peanuts, and that was then replaced with peanut cake. So peanut cake would have been, the hulls would have been removed. The peanut cake would have been expelled or pressed or something like that in order to extract out the oil. And so you had a defatted peanut cake that then reduced the fiber and increased the protein slightly. So that was 1957. But in 1969, after Dr. Lovell, who, by the way, was known as the father of catfish nutrition, after he moved to Auburn University and set up the first warm water fish nutrition research program, he then began to investigate adding vitamins to these much earlier Auburn fish feed formulas. In this report published in 1971, he showed that with adding vitamin to the unfortified control, he was able to increase production, or in other words, net weight gain, I suppose, by 19.3%. And then in an Auburn number 2, rather than his control, by the way, is shown up here at the top, and this was similar to the paper published by Hastings and Dupree earlier, and that one contained a poultry layer breeder premix to supply the vitamins. So then Dr. Lovell tested that, which is this one here, and then he also tested the Auburn number 2, and then when he tested the Auburn number 2, he actually saw an increase in production by 39.5%. So pretty much establishing that vitamins were absolutely needed to maximize performance, at least based on the data they knew then. Moving on to nutrient requirements. There are many reviews and overviews and different articles published by Ed Robinson and Meng Li on the nutrient requirements of catfish. And this particular table has been published by Robinson and Lee in both 2001 and maybe the most recent form of it was in 2015, but essentially the same table has been used many times. On this table, I'm simply showing you that the recommended protein level here is 26 to 32%, which is much, much lower than, than those early feeds from Auburn that were 42 and 46% protein. Also, the essential amino acids as a percent of protein had been determined by the early 2000s, so the values are shown here. In another paper, this one from 2005, he's showing that testing diets with 28% protein and with and without vitamin supplements, and then an 18% with and without supplements, and then a 10% protein diet with and without supplements. The conclusion you can see from this table was that 10% of the fish growth was very poor, and the fish grew very slowly. If you look at weight gain here, you see it's only 0.54, 0.62 presumably pounds, whereas the higher protein at 28% basically was nearly 1 pound weight gain in the period of which these fish were fed. The FCR was low for the high protein and very poor for the 10% protein diet. So they basically showed that you needed to have protein of approximately 28% in order to get the best performance. Moving on in the Robinson table, showing now digestible energy in kilocalories per gram of 8.5 to 10. I have a little bit of information I'm going to be showing you in a minute. Lipid in the feed, 4 to 6%. It could be a combination of animal fats and oils, vegetable, and fish oil. He was suggesting here that using a lot of marine fish oil might impart a fishy flavor to the fish, and then also that it was best to spray oil on finished pellets. This is my same experience formulating extruded feeds, floating feeds here in Southeast Asia, that for catfish and also for tilapia, the lipid levels are typically only needed in the range of 4 to 6%. And then the carbohydrate content is reported as 25 to 35%. Now, I would say that that is total non-fiber extract, and it says here floating feeds require at least 25% grain. So grain is not 100% starch. Starch content is typically around 70 to 75% of the quantity of the grain, nutritional value of the grain. And so a feed with 25% grain would have approximately 20% starch. And he notes that using grain byproducts is good for expansion of the feeds, for floating feeds, and also to help in binding. Down below, we now have something published in Dr. Lovell's 1998 second edition of his book, Nutrition and Feeding of Fish, showing the protein and digestible energy requirements by various sizes of channel catfish for maximum protein synthesis. So this is for maximum weight gain, but not fat deposition. It's for maximum protein synthesis, which is, after all, why we're growing the fish, to produce the protein. So different size fish here. protein quantity in the feed in terms of grams per 100 grams of fish per day, and then the digestible energy in terms of calories per 100 grams of presumably fresh fish per day, and then the DE protein ratio. Now, remember previously up here, uh, it was said 8.5 to 10, and we see basically 10 here. But for larger fish, they have lower protein. They seem to need a little bit more energy. Amino acid requirements of channel catfish, rainbow trout, Pacific salmon, common carp, and tilapia are shown in this table as a percent of digestible protein, and channel catfish is in the first column. For some of these amino acids, like for example arginine, all of the freshwater fish, the tilapia, the carp, the rainbow trout, and the catfish, are very similar. Arginine is needed in a higher amount for Pacific salmon, and that's partly related to the excretion of nitrogen waste. But looking down further down here in things like phenylalanine and tyrosine and methionine plus cysteine, the values are quite similar across the board. Lysine, very similar across all species. More recently, there are a number of papers that have come out where they have been looking at using or judging the efficiency of utilization of amino acids from intact protein and also from using crystalline amino acids. Now, the reason for this, and I don't have time to go into the details here, but these papers certainly explain everything clearly, is that in an attempt to try to reduce the protein levels of feed, or in other words, find a way to reduce feed costs to keep the catfish farmers competitive cost-wise, we want to know, can we reduce things like fish meal and reduce the quantities of our highly valuable proteins and instead supplement amino acids instead, yet maintain the growth rates. So that's what the interest is in looking at supplementing synthetic amino acids. So these three papers are all able to give you a very good example if this is an area of interest to you. We have here in the upper right-hand side here, a paper which was actually a master's thesis by this Vietnamese student at looking at the comparison of crystalline lysine and intact lysine used as a supplement in practical diets of channel catfish and Nile tilapia. So our interest then is in channel catfish, and he provided this graphic here showing that in the diet with the blue dots, the solid bar at the top, this was crystalline lysine, and the orange dots were the intact lysine coming from the raw materials. And the difference in weight gain was relatively minor. And if we look, we see enough spreading of these bars of these samples across these that we basically would statistically not see any difference there. However, in this paper by the student Zaret and Lovell, and also Payne was a contributor here from this 1999 study, they actually did find that the growth rate of intact protein, in this case the protein was mainly coming from soybean meal, and then also a diet with reduced levels of soy, more lower quality proteins, and then the use of L-lysine. In this one, they did find that there was a considerably poor growth. But I think research has shown that the results are more like what Nguyen is showing here, that in fact, using both synthetic lysine and also supplemental synthetic DL-methionine, or in fact, a couple of other methionine sources, actually does allow the feed industry to reduce the cost of expensive ingredients like fish meal. This paper talking about essential fatty acids by Trushinsky, it's actually a very complicated, very detailed paper from 2020, reevaluating polyunsaturated fatty acids essentiality in channel catfish. So here, not only are they looking at what's going on in body tissues, storage tissues, and so on, they're also looking at metabolism. They're looking at gene expression and analyzing different enzymes involved in the pathways of fatty acid metabolism. And they concluded that channel catfish have delta 5 and delta 6 desaturases, so they can take omega C18 PUFA, linoleic, and alpha linolenic, and they can elongate them to produce the minimal amounts of EPA, DHA, and arachidonic acid that are needed. Both N3 and N6 PUFAs, so not only linoleic but also alpha linolenic are needed and are considered essential in feeds for channel catfish. They also found that a dietary excess of N3-LC-PUFA, so in other words, an excess of EPA and DHA, may have detrimental effects on fish growth performance. And to meet the physiological demand for 20 carbon 4 or N6, this is actually arachidonic acid. So what this is implying then is it's not necessary to use a lot of fish oil in these diets, and it may actually be counterproductive to use a lot of fish oil, and that in fact you can rely on the fish to actually take the N3 and N6 PUFAs and elongate as needed. Although a little fish oil is generally a good idea because it has other properties and other things like cholesterol, which doesn't come from the plant-sourced oils, although some of them might have phytosterols. So anyway, if this is an area of interest for you, go and find this paper. It's very long and a lot of complicated information there. If you're into molecular biology, you may find it very, very interesting. So recall back earlier, we talked about the fact that Dr. Dupree had begun to identify vitamin deficiencies in channel catfish. Here's a list of signs of vitamin deficiency. Now, we do not talk about symptoms of vitamin deficiency because signs are coming from animals that are not able to tell us, where a symptom is something that's being described by the person with the condition. And of course, fish are not talking to us. We do note that many of these signs are common across all species that have been tested, but this list then is specific for catfish. We have the fat-soluble and water-soluble vitamins, the recommended levels requirement, and in some cases, R means they know that it's required. So qualitatively, it was shown it was required, but they had not yet determined the amount. And then a brief list of vitamin deficiency signs that have been noted in channel catfish. In a more up-to-date list, we have once again the fat-soluble and water-soluble vitamins, the recommended amounts, and then the form of the vitamin that is generally used in feed supplements. Lovell in his book had published this, showing the vitamin requirements of not only channel catfish, but also rainbow trout, salmon, carp, and tilapia. Some of them are quite similar. For example, we have here vitamin E, it's 50, 50, 50, and carp seems to be 100 for some reason. Riboflavin, the numbers are relatively close. We can see in some of these, the numbers are quite similar across most of these species, although there are some differences here and there. Now, whether these are actually real differences or whether we're suffering from a minority of tests, and maybe somebody could have done it again and might find a different result. We cannot tell because of the low amount of research that's done in this kind of a topic. Now, in this report called Refinement of Vitamin Supplementation in Diets for Pond-Raised Channel Catfish from 1997 by Robinson and Lee, or Lee and Robinson, I forget which, we have the vitamins as usual, the minimum requirements. Now, the minimum requirements, we don't necessarily want to use those because these are the quantities needed to prevent signs of deficiency, and they are generally not enough to promote optimal growth or optimal health. Previously, these amounts were recommended, and notice in some cases that they are at the upper end of the minimum requirements. And then after some time testing these formulations in the pond and maybe some experiments with increased levels and more updated levels, they come up with this updated recommendation. Some cases the quantity stayed the same. In some quantities, in some cases, actually, if you look at it, the quantities came down. Vitamin E came down from 60 to 30. Thiamine came down from 5.5 to 2.5. Riboflavin came down by half. Pyridoxine came down by half. Pantothenic acid came down by 60% or so. And so then we see some did not change at all. Choline, none. And that's because they determined that even though this is a requirement, the ingredients can supply adequate amounts. Now, when we talk about supplementation in feeds that are going to be manufactured, we do have to understand the reason why we don't want to use those minimum values is because there are problems with losses due to heat and moisture and relatively extreme processing conditions during processing, especially by extrusion. So here we have this report showing us that riboflavin, we have 100% retention. Thiamine, we have lost 35%, only 65% is retained. Pyridoxine, we lost 30%, and so on. And if we were to test biotin, we also find that biotin is basically going to be 100%. It's not been determined here by these people researching for catfish, but it's been shown with other species. Moving now to minerals, we do have mineral deficiency signs. These are with catfish, but once again, as with vitamins, many of these deficiency signs are common across many different species. We have BLD, means below level of detection. So basically, there's really no need to supplement feeds with any calcium at all because there's always adequate calcium in all ingredients that we use. Zinc we need, and generally we have trace minerals here. This overview from Robinson and Lee, now giving us the forms that are generally preferred to be added to the feeds. And we might note that one of the problems with feeds that contain a lot of soybean meal, cottonseed meal, and maybe canola meal is that they contain phytic acid, and the phytic acid actually binds to the zinc, the manganese, actually it binds to the selenium and the copper as well. And so we have to be concerned and over supplement if our feeds contain a lot of soybean meal. Now moving on to feed protein energy ratio. This is an important topic because we're always trying to balance the amount of energy coming from carbohydrates and fats to minimize the catabolism of protein as an energy source. So this is of considerable interest to everyone. And of course, carbohydrates are the cheapest source of energy that there is. But many fish have some difficulty handling carbohydrates as an energy source, and a lot of fish prefer to use fat and oil as an energy source. So in this paper entitled Protein and Energy Requirements of Fingerling Catfish Growth for Maintenance and Maximum Growth, they were looking at two different diets. Same protein to energy ratio, one diet, experiment one, experiment conducted to the conclusion, and then the same experiment ran again in the same facility, but they did it with a 35% protein diet, 10% protein higher. And so because the experiment 2 followed the experiment 1, the fish were slightly larger. I give an example here of the two diets that they had. So these are purified research diets, casein, gelatin, white dextran, very similar to Halver's H440. And experiment 1 and experiment 2, see the quantity of casein is up because this is higher protein. And then the dextran is up higher because they want to raise the energy level, and everything else is more or less the same. Fish were fed 1 time per day at rates equaling 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.54, and 5% of wet body weight per day for 8 weeks. And then they had another fish treatment that was starved for 8 weeks. The first thing we notice when we go down here, we see the starved fish right here, that actually they had negative growth rate. So they lost weight, both when we're talking about a protein intake basis and also on an energy intake basis. For the fish that were fed, when we look on the basis of protein intake, we get up to about 7.5% or 7.5 grams, 7.5 grams protein per kilogram body weight per day. And then adding more protein actually seems to cause a decrease in growth rate. And so that may then be overloading the metabolic system in the fish. Likewise, when we look at the energy intake is somewhere around 800, 850 kilocalories per kilogram body weight, and then more energy. Once again, the growth rate goes down. The conclusions from their study was that 35% protein had better feed efficiency. Protein requirement for maximum growth was 8.75 grams, which is basically what we see here is 8.5 is right here, about the maximum right here. Protein maintenance requirement was about 1 to 1.32 grams protein kilogram body weight per day, meaning that if the protein level was lower than that, then the fish lost weight. And for energy maintenance requirement, it was around 15.06 to 17.3 kilocalories per kilogram body weight per day. Now, these researchers fed the fish only 1 time per day. And they actually said in their discussion and conclusion that if they were to feed the fish more times per day, 2 times or maybe 3 times per day, that they would actually probably end up with a lower FCR, and they might actually end up with a requirement for lower protein. So anyway, there's that. I think that this is one of many similar studies. Now let's talk about feeds and feeding. This table is from Ed Robinson's chapter in Dr. Lovell's book about feeding channel catfish. This table shows us fish body weight from 27 grams up to 1.6 kilos or 1.36 kilos. The feed consumption as a percent of body weight per day. So we're starting out for small fish, 4 to 4.5% body weight per day, and large fish only 1 to 1.1% body weight per day. So this might also be divided up into 2 or 3 meals. If I recall properly, I remember saying in a previous video that 3 feedings per day seem to be giving the best results in the catfish farms. And as the fish grow, the FCR increases, or in other words, small fish, the efficiency of utilization is high, and as they uh, get larger and larger, then their nutrient uptake and their utilization decreases. Feeding catfish in commercial ponds, optimum temperatures, 28 to 31 degrees Celsius. Here we have fish size in pounds per 1,000 fish. So divide by about half to convert this to kilograms. And then we have feed consumption as percent of body weight. This is the same data from the previous slide and the same feed conversion ratio. So this is at the optimum temperature. One problem that the commercial catfish industry has is that it takes 2 seasons in order to reach the commercial size. Consequently, the fish have to be overwintered. And if the water temperature drops down too low, the fish essentially stop eating. There are 2 things that they do. One, they develop winter feed formulations, and they also have winter feeding schedules, which are different than during the peak growing season. So temperature in the first axis under 13 degrees Celsius, and then the second block is between 13 and 21 degrees Celsius. And then above 21, this is considered to be back in the growing season temperature. Feed is much less, less than 0.5 to 1% body weight per day for fingerlings. And it's about half of what it was previously. And then for larger fish, it's considerably lower. Feeding 1 or 2 days per week, so very infrequent feeding. They don't want to overfeed. If they overfeed, the fish won't be in the mood to eat. They will just simply waste the feed. Now, basically below 13 degrees, essentially not eating at all. So between 13 and 21, they're going to be fed daily or every other day. And this is for the grow out and the body weight percent and frequency. So this is for the different types of catfish. Here's a paper by, once again, Robinson and Lee from 2010, looking at size and feed conversion ratio. Here we have fish, kilograms per fish, from 230 grams up to 1.1 kilos. Initial weight, we have final weight here. So for the small fish, the weight has essentially 80%, 100%. For the large fish, the weight gain is fairly small, but this is quite common with large fish. You can't really expect them to double their size. Number of days, and then we have the feed consumption in percent body weight per day, the feed conversion ratio, and then the cumulative feed conversion ratio. So this is from the beginning until harvest, the amount of feed fed versus the amount of gain. we're saying that it's somewhere, for the most part, below 1 kilogram, that it's somewhere averaging around 1.9 or maybe 2. And then we have some survival. So they came up with this graph. We have feed conversion ratio on the vertical axis and the fish weight, and showing that as the fish gain weight, the FCR is going to increase, and presumably this is kind of conclusion is there's really not much you can do about it. Now let's look at feeds and ingredients. So this is the last major section of this presentation. Going back again to that historical perspective paper I mentioned at the beginning. Currently, commercial feeds used for growing catfish to food size typically contain 28% protein, about 2.7 kilocalories per gram digestible energy, and are primarily plant-based. For example, the ingredient composition would be similar to the following: soybean meal 21%, cottonseed meal 20%, corn gluten feed or corn germ meal 25%, corn 15%, wheat middling 7%. These are all of the ingredients which come out of the United States farming industry. Soybean, of course, grown everywhere, cottonseed meal in the South, corn throughout the South and Midwest, and then wheat middlings. This is going to come more from the prairies where they do the wheat farming. Then we also see fat, and they are adding lysine, and then also quite common now to be adding 500 units of phytase enzyme per kilogram of diet, and vitamin and trace minerals. Now I'm taking a series of tables from this paper, Catfish Nutrition Feeds, publication 2413 from the extension at Mississippi State University. Here we see, if we're doing feed formulation, restrictions for least cost formulation of a 28% protein feed for catfish. So on the previous slide, they gave us a formula would be approximately like this. But when we look now down here, at the bottom, there are some restrictions. Cottonseed meal, maximum 15%. Whole fish meal, maximum 3%. Non-fish animal protein, so that would include animal byproducts, 3%. Maximum xanthophylls, 11 ppm. Now that's because Dr. Dupree, many years ago, showed that if total xanthophylls, so xanthophylls is coming from corn, there's xanthophylls in soy, so these are the yellow and orange pigments. If they exceed 11 ppm, then the channel catfish will have orange or yellow pigmentation in the flesh, and this is a fish that they do not want to see any pigmentation. They want white. Now, when I started formulating feeds for catfish here in Thailand, where they want yellow, the Clarius catfish to be yellow meat, I found this paper and I said, well, if 11 is not going to show, then I should start at about 20. And so then I went up to about 20 ppm of xanthophylls, and eventually found that the optimum was around 25 or 26 for our market here where they wanted yellow. We then see here available lysine and available methionine and available methionine cysteine, and they have the minimum values. Now, that would come from a combination of ingredients and maybe also from some addition of lysine, as you saw on the previous slide. This is from Wilson's book, Composition of a Typical 32% crude protein extruded catfish feed. So the other one was a 28%. This is the 32. Menhaden fish meal, 8%. Soybean meal, 48%. Corn, 31%. And so on. I have these two photographs of a truck used to spray out pelleted feed into these large catfish ponds. I know it comes from one of the documents that's published by either Mississippi or by Texas, but after I posted it, I couldn't find the reference, so I apologize for not giving you the source of those. Here's some more examples of feed formulations ranging with protein levels from 32% down to 26%, which is the range of feeds more or less that are used these days. Heavy use of soybean meal and cottonseed meal, menhaden fish meal, relatively low quantity. Menhaden fish meal because that's the fish meal that's made natively in the U.S. East Coast and in around the Gulf of Mexico. Some meat meal, meat and bone meal, blood meal, 65%. So that is a fairly high protein level for an ingredient that they said has some bone in it. Corn, wheat middlings. So these formulations are actually quite simple and straightforward. And you see here varying as the protein level comes down, the soy comes down, everything else, and the corn goes up. Other than that, everything more or less stays the same. Going back to Tom Lovell's book, here's an example of some high protein fry feed, 50% protein. Now notice it's 60% fish meal. Now, when we're talking about very small quantities of high protein feed for hatchery use, there's nothing really wrong with having a high protein level from fish meal because the fish meal is highly digestible and in the big picture, the quantity is actually very small. And then we have a fingerling feed. So this would be one stage up. Protein level is dropped down to 35%. And notice that in the high protein fry feed, there is basically very little contributing fiber. So there's no soybean meal in there, there's no cottonseed meal in there, there's no corn in there, but there is wheat middlings. Now the wheat middlings will contribute some fiber. Carrying on, this is another document called Feeding Catfish. And here we have some formulas that's basically similar to what we saw already from the other paper. And then the one thing that we get here is a typical catfish winter feed. And in the winter, because they have a lot of problems with Edwardsiella, which is a pathogen which causes a lot of mortality, they use a drug produced by Roche called Romet 30. And for years and years and years, this was the only drug that was authorized for use in fish farming in the United States. So their formula is a standard winter feed formula, 25% protein, slow sinking. And then they have a medicated feed formula. So whether this feed formula is used prophylactically or whether it's just used if they begin to show signs of disease, I don't know. If you're a catfish farmer watching this, maybe you can explain when and why they would choose to use a medicated feed with Romet 30 in the winter. This paper, effects of iron supplementation to cottonseed meal diets on the growth performance of channel catfish. This is actually quite an issue of concern because cottonseed meal contains a anti-nutritional factor called gossypol. And what we're really worried about is free gossypol. Free gossypol binds iron and it also causes a diversion in the process of lysine metabolism, and we essentially face a loss of lysine. So in these experiments, they had three levels of cottonseed meal, 0, 27.5, and 55% of the diet, as you can see here. And then they had three supplementation levels of ferrous iron, 40, 336, and 671 ppm. The 0 had minimum 40 because actually the trace mineral mix, which is included in every single one of these, provided 40 ppm of ferrous iron. And then fish were fed to apparent satiation twice daily. Looking then at, first of all, the feeds with 0 cottonseed meal, 27.5 cottonseed meal, and 55, the conclusion was that having 27.5, I think this is a more cost-effective feed. It's going to be a little bit cheaper because cottonseed is cheaper than soy. But when they start looking at the weight gain and the feed efficiency and protein efficiency, 55% cottonseed meal was in fact too high. Now remember, back when we saw that list from Dr. Robinson, he said that uh, the upper maximum of cottonseed meal in that 28% formula was only 15%. So 55 was clearly too much, according to these researchers. Another mineral that's of concern is available phosphorus. We have phosphorus in a lot of our ingredients, but the problem with ingredients, a lot of them, the oilseed meals and so on, and even things like whole wheat, is that a lot of the phosphorus is bound up in phytic acid, and phytic acid is not digestible, and that phosphorus is essentially biologically unavailable to the fish. So in this experiment, they were looking at phosphorus fractions of various feedstuffs, looking at the apparent phosphorus availability. So we have a list of ingredients here, organic matter, percent protein, and then lipid and so on. But when we look at this one, we start to then begin to judge what's going on with the phosphorus. Now, they're looking at soluble reactive phosphorus. So they're calling it SRP. This is readily available phosphorus. So this is basically biologically available now. And it does not include phytase-bound phosphorus. However, down here we also see total phosphorus. So total phosphorus would also include the phytase phosphorus, which is basically not available. Looking at these different ingredients, we have the soluble reactive phosphorus, or in other words, the phosphorus, which is available. We look at the total phosphorus. In the case of the soybean meal, out of 7.1 grams total phosphorus, only 2.1, or in other words, a little over 20% is available. And for wheat middlings, it's around 35%. So not very high. Wheat, notice that it's only about 1/4. So it's also quite low. But in some of our ingredients, like some of these other ones up here, once again, anything that has fiber in it, anything that has non-starch polysaccharides, anything that has phytic acid in it, the available phosphorus is going to be quite low in relation to total phosphorus. And then the third table over here is giving us the apparent availability. So this is going to be impacted by the amount of phytic acid and fiber from these ingredients. So we see the availability of the soluble reactive phosphorus is typically very high. It's fully available. But for the total phosphorus, um, it ranges between about 30% to only around 77%, I suppose here is the highest. of the total phosphorus. So much of the phosphorus is not biologically available. And if we don't use phytase enzyme, then much of this phosphorus is going to end up going out into the water and contributing to eutrophication of the water body. Another table from this book, Channel Catfish Farming Handbook. Average percent available, apparent availability of phosphorus from some phosphorus supplements that are commonly used in feed, from fish meal, some purified protein sources. Of course, these are not used in any kind of production feeds, but they're from research feeds. And then we have some plant sources. So many of the tables focusing on channel catfish cover the same basic set of ingredients because the industry in America really relies very heavily on the more or less locally available feed ingredients. Another paper about available phosphorus requirements of food size channel catfish. So now we're not looking at the feed in phosphorus, we're now looking at how much phosphorus do the animals actually need in terms of available phosphorus. Have diets with rising levels of dietary available phosphorus. We have the weight gain here, and somewhere around 0.36 to 0.4 seems to give us about the maximum weight gain. It gives us 0.36 gives us the lowest feed conversion, and we don't see any significant difference here in the dressing percentage. Looking at the animals, at the bone ash, bone phosphorus, and bone breaking strength of these catfish that were fed these different diets. Bone ash, the highest bone ash was, of course, in the phosphorus content was in the diet with the greatest amount of available phosphorus. Bone phosphorus, likewise, highest according to what they were in, more or less according to what they were fed. And then we have bone breaking strength. So once we essentially reach 0.36, above that, the bones are all more or less equivalent in strength, and adding more phosphorus does not make the bones stronger. Okay, carrying on from that earlier publication, Catfish Nutrition Feeds. Now we have the more or less chemical analysis of these ingredients, and there's several pages here. So on this page, we have the some of the key protein ingredients: soybean meal, cottonseed meal, peanut meal, fish meal, meat and bone meal, blood meal, catfish offal meal, poultry byproduct, hydrolyzed feather meal, canola meal, distillers grains, full fat soybeans, and then those are all above are for providing protein, and the ones now are more or less high carbohydrate, designed to provide energy to the feed. So corn grain, wheat grain, wheat middlings, rice bran, corn gluten feed, and then oil supplements, catfish oil and fish oil and animal fat. Here we have a paper, comparable quality of feedstuffs for catfish feeds. This is basically showing us the same list that we just saw, except we have porcine meal on the list here, and all of the rest we've seen on other previous pages. So we have dry matter, digestible energy, the basic approximate analysis, protein, fat, fiber, total phosphorus, total lysine, available lysine, total methionine, and available lysine. Those are useful numbers. And then finally, being concerned that we don't want more than 11 ppm of xanthophylls in the catfish feed, giving us the concentration of yellow pigments. And we notice that distillers dried grains with solubles, especially if it's made from corn, and will have a fair amount of xanthophylls in it. When we talk about formulating feeds, we really need to talk about available nutrients. So tables of apparent amino acid availability are very important for us. We need to be formulating on available amino acids, not on total amino acids. And here from the research work of Wilson, this is published in this book by Webster and Chorn Lim, giving us the average apparent amino acid availabilities for all of these key feedstuffs used in catfish feed. Here we have the apparent availability, apparent digestibility for protein, fat, carbohydrate, and energy of basically the same list of feedstuffs. Amino acids. This is the concluding statement from this publication, The Historical Perspective on Channel Catfish, published in 2019. And just simply quote, what the future holds for catfish nutrition research is uncertain. However, in our opinion, it is unlikely that any major breakthroughs will be made in the foreseeable future. This may seem overly pessimistic, but our appraisal seems realistic, noting that there are currently few affordable, nutritious feedstuffs available for use in catfish feeds. In the long term, this may change, but until then, the industry continues to be dependent on traditional crops, very, very reliant on the crops that are grown in the American Midwest and in the American South. They are readily available, easy to obtain by truck or by train. They're not imported, and so they really cannot do anything else than this. And I think that this conclusion from Robinson and Lee is they don't foresee any new ingredients, any new agricultural byproducts that could be coming up that could be cost effective in these feeds, cost effective in the sense that the cost benefit ratio of what they're already using is really about the best that they have available to them. And from the point of view of nutrition research, everything was more or less done by about the 1990s. There really is nowhere to go now, other than the fact that maybe there might be some fine tuning available with research more or less in the field of molecular biology. Now, in part one, I mentioned the fact that the second leading producer of channel catfish in the world was China. So I asked DeepSeek, which is the AI from China that was released in January 2025, not so long ago. I asked it, are there any published channel catfish feed formulas outlining the ingredients that are used? And I got this information back. So there's 3 or 4 formulas that they're showing here. So this formula, fish meal, high quality, 5 to 10%, soybean meal, 25 to 35%, rapeseed meal, 10 to 15, because China grows a lot of rapeseed. Corn, wheat flour, 20 to 25. China grows corn, they grow wheat, they can supply those locally. Rice bran, local product. Poultry byproduct meal, they do have some amount there. And certainly China has feather meal. And then they have fish oil, soybean oil, vitamins and minerals, dicalcium phosphate, lysine, methionine, and so on. And they're basically using the same protein range, 28 to 32%, and fat 5 to 7, probably coming from the recommendations made by Robinson and Lee here in the United States. The Chinese are also concerned about rising feed costs, and they're looking for alternative proteins, and they're using more and more animal byproducts. They're looking at fermented animal agricultural products like fermented soybean meal. They're looking at things like insect meal, but whether insect meal is cost competitive and in anywhere in the world at the moment, I wouldn't think so. Mostly they're relying on floating pellets, and they're doing lots and lots of research into feed additives like probiotics. A lot of enzymes are produced in China, and they're looking at immunostimulants and immune boosters like beta glucans. So that one previously was for grow out. Here's a formula on the left for high protein feed for fingerlings, juveniles. 15 to 20% fish meal, 30 to 40% soy, 15 to 20% wheat flour, some yeast extract in there, some fish oil, methionine, and so on. And then finally, we have a broodstock feed. So the broodstock feed, same fish meal, but now they've added something special. They've added squid meal, 5%. This is an ingredient that's commonly included in shrimp feed. And so it's there primarily for its very interesting addition of nutrients like cholesterol and also the long chain polyunsaturated fatty acids like EPA and DHA. So there we have soy, now wheat germ, because they're adding, this is presumably as raw wheat germ because they're wanting to add vitamin E. And then they have some spirulina, 2%. And they're doing that. They want the carotenoids to improve egg color. Now, spirulina is not an ingredient that has a lot of astaxanthin, and astaxanthin is something that we do find in fish eggs. But rather than adding, let's say, synthetic astaxanthin, here they're showing adding spirulina. So that's the end of the detailed information. The first one on the left, Catfish Protein Nutrition. This is published from Mississippi, and you can find this quite easily in many different places on the internet. You can search for Robinson and Lee, Catfish Nutrition, whatever. This one is focusing particularly on the protein content of catfish feeds. Next, we have a book, relatively recent, Feeds and Feeding Practices in Aquaculture, edited by D. Allen Davis from Auburn University. You can just look for that anywhere you buy books. You can find it in Amazon. You can buy it from the publisher. You can buy it from Barnes & Noble, number of places. That one is the old one. You can actually find that now, for example, as a used book relatively cheaply if you want. Or even if you're buying a new volume, it's a discounted price because in 2022 he introduced the second edition. Same author, some differences among the authors, and more updated information. On the left, composition and formulation of channel catfish feeds. This is produced once again by Mississippi, and you can find that easily in the middle. And on the right, we have the two books coming from Carl Webster and Sean Lim in the center, Nutrient Requirements and Feeding of Finfish for Aquaculture. Because these are Southerners, there's quite a decent chapter on channel catfish there. And then you have Robert Wilson, the expert in amino acids, doing a lot of work with channel catfish from Mississippi State University. That's also a very useful book to find. Tom Lovell brought out the first edition of his book, Nutrition and Feeding of Fish, in 1989. Then in the center, we have the National Research Council's. This is the 1993 edition. The current edition is the 2011, the next edition after this one. That one you can find either at the website of the National Academies Press, or you can find it in Amazon or any other online bookstore. On the right-hand side, a practical guide to nutrition, feeding, and feeds of catfish. This has been revised a couple of 3 times. This is the latest one from 2021. And now I just want to finish off with a couple of websites. So the first one is the Southern Regional Aquaculture Center, SRAC. And If you scan that QR code, it will take you to that website. But what I have done here is I have gone to the search engine and I have searched for catfish. And it gives us a fairly long list of publications there. And I just quickly highlighted some of the ones that you can find that are published by this Southern Regional Aquaculture Center. All very useful. Many of them are by Robinson and Lee or by Lee and Robinson. Okay, there you have it. And if you scan this QR code, I've uh, uh, find these fact sheets for specifically for catfish. But if you go to the lead page for this, you will find on many different kinds of fish for different kinds of animals, stuff about farming methods and pond preparation, all aeration, all kinds of things. But when we specifically search for catfish, this is what comes up. Another one is the Journal of the Southeastern Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. Here I did a search for catfish feed, and then some of the papers that I cited in my talk are shown here. And if you notice, every single one of them has a PDF that you can download. You can go in there and search. Actually, there's a lot of good things in this website, plus also in the journal itself. Now, going to the Mississippi State University Agricultural and Forestry Experiment Station, searching for catfish, we can find all of these. Catfish feed manufacturer from 1994, feeding catfish from 1994 as well. And then this one, comparative quality of foodstuffs for catfish feeds, 2013. That's actually quite a good book because even though it's a little bit old, there really is nothing new that we know. So that's the end of my talk. This is a picture from Extension from Mississippi State showing channel catfish being harvested by seine net out of a pond. You can find me here on YouTube. You can find me on X as Fish Nutrition Expert. You can find me in LinkedIn by my name. Apple Podcasts are coming. Please subscribe to my channel. And if you've enjoyed the video, please like it, make a comment about something that you know more about than I do. If you want to correct something that I said that wasn't quite correct, or if you actually have some good information you would like to share, please share it as well. Turn on notifications so you will receive updates for my new videos. This is currently almost video number 20, but I am going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing till at least 50 videos. And I will also be branching out into some other areas of nutrition. But there's a lot more that I'm going to be putting on this website. Finally, if you are a student or a person who is very interested in nutrition for channel catfish or other fish species, please share it with your fellow students, share it with your colleagues. I will appreciate that very much. It will help my information to be spread far and wide and help people out. Thank you very much.